My girlfriend said, "Let's just stay together until something better comes along." I replied, "That's fair." Then I became the one who left first and made sure she understood what better actually meant. "Let's be honest with each other for once." She said that on a Tuesday night, sitting cross-legged on my couch, not even looking up from her phone. "I think we're just staying together until something better comes along." I remember the exact second those words landed. Not because they shocked me into anger, not because I threw something or slammed a door, but because somewhere deep in my chest, in a place I hadn't checked on in a long time, something quietly agreed. And that terrified me more than anything she could have said. I looked at her for a moment. She was still scrolling. Casual. Like she'd just suggested we order Thai instead of pizza. And I said the only thing that came out naturally. "That's fair." She looked up then, for the first time in what felt like weeks. And I saw it on her face, the flicker of surprise. Because she'd expected me to argue, to beg, to say, "No, no, babe, don't say that. We're something real." But I didn't. I just nodded slowly, reached for the remote, and turned the volume up on the show we weren't really watching anyway. And that was the night everything changed. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly, deeply, and completely. If you enjoy real stories like this, subscribe, because what happened next changed everything for me. We were 26 and 24 at the time, together for 2.5 years, living in the same mid-sized city, working our separate jobs, sharing weekends that had started to feel like obligations. Her name was Brooke, and I had loved her, genuinely, at some point. I want to make that clear before I go any further, because this isn't a story about a villain. It's a story about two people who stayed past the expiration date, and only one of them noticed. After that Tuesday, I didn't bring it up again. Neither did she. We slipped back into the routine like nothing had shifted. Morning coffee, occasional texts during the day, evenings on that same couch. But something had cracked open inside me. And once a crack appears, you can't unsee it. I started paying attention, not in a paranoid way, not scrolling through her phone or timing how long she took to reply, but in a quiet, observational way. The kind of attention you pay when you finally take off the glasses you didn't know you were wearing. I noticed she'd started getting dressed up more on nights I wasn't invited. Not dramatically, just differently. More care, more effort. The kind of effort she used to put in for our date nights, back in the beginning. I noticed she laughed more freely on calls with her friends than she had with me in months. I noticed she'd stopped asking about my day. Not meanly, just she'd stopped. Like the curiosity had dried up somewhere along the way. And I noticed that I had stopped too. That's the part that's hardest to admit. I had stopped reaching, stopped trying, stopped showing up in the ways that matter. We had both quietly quit on each other, but we were still cashing the checks of a relationship that had no funds left. About 2 weeks after that Tuesday conversation, I went for a walk, which sounds small, but it wasn't. I hadn't walked anywhere with purpose in months. I'd been driving everywhere, eating at my desk, spending free time horizontal. I put on shoes that weren't slides, stepped outside at 7 in the morning while the city was still half asleep, and I just walked. No destination, no podcast, just me and the sound of my own footsteps. And somewhere around the third block, I had a thought that stopped me mid-stride. If she left tomorrow, what would I have? Not who would I have. What? What would I show for 2.5 years of my life? I stood there on the sidewalk, a guy in a faded hoodie with sleep still in the corner of his eye, and I genuinely could not answer that question. My job was fine. Not exciting. Fine. My body was fine. Not terrible, not strong. Fine. My apartment was fine. Functional. Beige. I had become a person made entirely of the word fine. And standing there on that sidewalk at 7 in the morning, I decided that was done. Not because I wanted to win her back. Not yet. Not because I wanted to prove something to her. At least, not consciously. I decided it was done because the version of myself I had become was not someone I wanted to be. Regardless of her. Regardless of anyone. I didn't announce it. I didn't make a big speech or buy a journal or post some motivational quote at midnight. I just started. That morning, I walked for 45 minutes. The next morning, I walked again. By the end of the week, I was running. Badly at first. Gasping after 4 minutes. Hunched over a lamppost like I'd been shot. But I kept going. At work, I'd been coasting. I was good at my job, project coordination for a mid-sized logistics firm, but I hadn't pushed in a long time. I'd been doing the minimum with maximum comfort. So I started staying 30 minutes later every day. Started finishing projects ahead of deadline. Started raising my hand in meetings for things that scared me a little. My manager, A sharp woman named Petra who did not give compliments casually pulled me aside after about 3 weeks. "I don't know what's gotten into you," she said, "but keep it going." I kept it going. At home, things with Brooke were stable. That's the word for it. Stable. Like a patient on a ventilator. Technically alive. We still had dinner together a few nights a week. We still slept in the same bed. We still had conversations. But they were surface conversations. "How was your day?" "Fine." "What do you want for dinner?" "Don't care, you pick." "Did you see that thing online?" "Yeah, wild." We had mastered the art of filling silence without saying anything. And I was slowly realizing that the silence wasn't the problem. The problem was that neither of us was trying to fill it with anything real anymore. One night, she came home from a night out with her friends, and she was glowing. Not in a suspicious way, I want to be clear. Just in the way people glow when they've spent time somewhere they actually want to be. Her eyes were bright. She was laughing at something on her phone as she kicked off her shoes. And I thought, when was the last time she looked like that when she came home to me? I couldn't remember. She went to the bathroom, came out, asked if there was any leftovers, ate standing at the counter, and disappeared into the bedroom. I sat on the couch in the dark for a while. Not sad exactly, just honest with myself in a way I'd been avoiding. About 6 weeks in, something happened I didn't expect. A guy from my college years reached out. His name was Owen. We'd been close once, drifted apart the way people do in their 20s. He was passing through the city for work and asked if I wanted to grab dinner. I almost said no. I almost said I was busy, or tired, or made up some vague excuse. But I said yes. And that dinner changed something. We sat at a table for 2 hours and talked like no time had passed. He was building something of his own now, a small supply chain consultancy, 3 years in, barely sleeping, absolutely on fire about it. He talked about the early days when he had nothing but an idea and a spreadsheet and a lot of doubt. He talked about the moment he realized he was building something real. And I sat across from him thinking, I don't have a version of that story. Not because I needed to start a company, but because I didn't have anything I was on fire about. I had comfort. I had routine. I had a relationship held together with habit and the shared reluctance to have a hard conversation. I drove home that night, and I felt something shift in me that I can only describe as the moment before a decision. Like standing at the edge of a high dive. Not having jumped yet, but knowing you're going to. Brooke was awake when I got home. That was unusual. She was sitting up in bed with the lamp on, phone face down, and she had the look of someone who had been thinking hard about something. "We need to talk," she said. My stomach didn't drop. It steadied, like my body already knew what was coming and had decided to be calm about it. I sat down on the edge of the bed. "I've been feeling kind of disconnected from us," she said. "Yeah," I said. "Me too." She blinked. "You have." "For a while, honestly." She looked at me with something I couldn't quite read. "I thought you were happy," she said. "I thought I was too." She picked up her phone, put it down again. "I don't know what I want," she said. "I feel like I love you, but I'm not sure I'm in love with you. Does that make sense?" "It makes complete sense." She searched my face like she was looking for the part of me that was supposed to be breaking right now. "You're not upset?" she asked. "I'm not upset," I said. "I'm just not surprised." Another long pause. "I think I need space to figure things out," she said. I nodded. "Okay. Not a breakup," she added quickly. "Just space. To think." I looked at the lamp. At the shadows it made on the wall. At the 2 years' worth of accumulated small things on her side of the room. And I said, "Okay. Take the space you need." She looked almost disappointed that I agreed so easily. Like she wanted me to fight her on it. To say, "No. Please, don't pull away. I need you." And I realized, maybe a month ago, I would have. But not now. Now I had something growing in me that was bigger than the fear of losing her. It wasn't confidence, not fully. It was something quieter than that. It was self-respect putting down roots. The space lasted about 2 weeks. She stayed at her friend Qley's place for the first few days, then came back. She moved through the apartment cautiously, like she was gauging how I was handling it. And I was handling it fine. Not in a performative, look how unbothered I am way. Genuinely fine. Because during those 2 weeks, I had doubled down on everything I'd started. I ran every morning. I read at night, instead of mindlessly scrolling. I started cooking real meals, not anything fancy, but food that required attention and intention. I went through my apartment and threw out or donated everything that I'd been keeping out of laziness rather than love. It sounds minor, but living in a space that felt curated and intentional made me feel like a different person. Or rather, it made me feel like the person I'd always intended to become and had put on hold. Brooke noticed. She noticed the running shoes by the door every morning. She noticed the cleared-out surfaces. She noticed that I'd replaced the sad shelf of forgotten takeout menus and dead batteries with actual books. One evening, she came into the kitchen while I was making pasta from scratch. Not complicated, just patient, and she leaned against the counter watching me. "You seem different," she said. "Maybe I am," I said. "Good different or bad different?" "I thought about that." "Just different," I said. She stood there a while longer than she needed to, then went back to her side of the apartment. Here's where the story gets complicated. And I say that not to be dramatic, but because real life doesn't move in clean narrative arcs. It zigzags. It backtracks. It revisits places you thought you'd left. About 3 months after that Tuesday conversation, the original one, the something better conversation, Brooke came home and she was different. Lighter. More present. She sat down next to me on the couch and she actually leaned against my shoulder, which she hadn't done in months. And she said, "I miss us." And some part of me, the old part, the part that had been waiting for this like a rescue, stirred. I won't lie. It stirred. Because I still cared about her. You don't stop caring about someone because your relationship stopped working. The feelings don't evaporate. They just get complicated. "I miss us too," I said. And I meant it. I miss the version of us that had existed before we got too comfortable. Before we started treating each other like furniture. She tilted her head up and looked at me and said, "Can we try again? Like actually try?" And the old me would have said yes instantly, without question, without thinking, without asking what actually trying would look like from her end. But I took a breath, and I said, "I want to, but I need to be honest with you about something first." She sat up a little. "What?" "I've been doing a lot of thinking," I said, "and I think we've been staying together because it was easier than the alternative, not because it was what we actually wanted." She was quiet. "And I'm not doing that anymore," I said. "I can't. I'm not built for comfortable and going nowhere. If we try again, it has to be real, or it's not worth it." She looked at me for a long time. "Are you saying you want to break up?" "I'm saying I want to know what you actually want. Not what's convenient. Not what's comfortable. What you want." She didn't answer right away, and the silence told me more than her words would have. We did try. To be fair to both of us, we did try. For about a month, we were more attentive than we'd been in years. She cooked dinner twice. We went for walks in the evening. We had real conversations, the kind with silence and honesty in them, not just noise to fill space. There were a few nights that genuinely felt warm, felt like the beginning, and I held on to those nights. But I was also watching, not suspicious, just paying attention. And what I noticed was this: the effort wasn't equal. I was showing up consistently. She was showing up when she felt like it. Some nights, she was present and engaged, and the girl I'd fallen for at 23. Other nights, she was somewhere else, on her phone, thinking about something she wouldn't share. There was one Saturday afternoon we'd planned to spend together. No agenda, just together. She canceled at noon to go help her friend Qley with something. Fine. Stuff happens. But when I checked in that evening, she was posting stories from a rooftop bar. Not with Qley, with people I didn't recognize, including one guy who appeared in 3 of the photos. She hadn't lied to me exactly, but she hadn't told me the truth either. And when I mentioned it gently later, she got defensive. "I didn't think I needed to report every detail of my day to you." "I didn't ask for a report," I said. "I asked why you told me you were helping a friend." "I was with Qley. Those are her friends." "Okay. Don't do the passive okay thing," she said. "I'm not being passive," I said. "I genuinely have nothing more to say about it. I just noticed the gap between what you said and what happened. That's all." She folded her arms. And in that fold, in that closed-off body language, I saw something I hadn't been able to name before. I saw someone who had not actually decided. Not on me. Not on us. Not on what she wanted. She was still, as she had said herself months ago, waiting to see what came along. And she was using me as the baseline, the floor, the safety net. And I had been letting her. The guy in those photos showed up once more, 2 weeks later. Not in the apartment. I want to be clear, nothing happened that I know of. But he showed up in a conversation she was having on her phone late one night. She was laughing, soft and private. The way you laugh at someone who is saying things you want to hear. And I didn't say anything. I just got up, went to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and stood at the window for a while, looking at the street, the night traffic, the city that kept moving regardless of anyone's feelings. And I had a thought that arrived with startling clarity. I am worth more than being someone's placeholder. Not angrily, not bitterly, just factually. The way you recognize a truth that was already there, waiting for you to catch up to it. I went back to the bedroom and I said, I think we should end this. She looked up from her phone, and this time, she didn't look relieved. She looked genuinely surprised, which surprised me. What? I think we've run our course, I said, and I think we both know it. We're just not willing to say it because saying it makes it real. Where is this coming from? It's been coming for a long time, I said. You said it yourself, months ago. We're just waiting for something better to come along. I didn't mean it like that, she said. How did you mean it? She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. I was just being honest about how I was feeling in that moment, she said. I know, I said, and I appreciated that. I'm being honest about how I'm feeling now. So what, you're just done? Just like that? Not just like that, I said. It's been months of this. Of almost. Of half effort. Of neither of us being fully here. I'm tired of almost. She got quiet. A different kind of quiet than before. Not the defensive kind. The real kind. I thought we were working on it, she said. We were working on the surface, I said. We weren't working on the actual problem. Which is that we stopped choosing each other a long time ago. And we've been staying out of comfort, not out of love. She didn't argue that. And I noticed she didn't argue that. The next 2 weeks were the hardest. Not because of the breakup conversations themselves, but because of the in-between moments. The habit of turning to tell her something funny and remembering. The reflex of checking my phone when I heard a notification, still expecting it to be her. The way the apartment felt different at 7 in the evening when the door didn't open. Those are the things they don't tell you about endings. It's not the big dramatic moments that get you. It's the small voids. The empty slots in the day where another person used to be. She cried once, in that first week. Called me and cried. Not asking for me back, exactly. But not asking either. She said she felt stupid. She said she was scared she'd made a mistake. She said, "You're different now. You're so different from the person I was with." And I said, very gently, "I know. Is that why you're leaving?" "I'm leaving because I finally know what I want. And staying doesn't match that anymore." Silence. "Then, what do you want?" "Someone who isn't waiting for better," I said. "Someone who looks at what we have and decides, this is what I want. Not a backup plan. A choice." She was quiet for a long time. "I think I wanted that with you," she said. "I think I just didn't know how to want it." "I believe that," I said. "And I hope you figure it out." "I genuinely do." We didn't speak again after that for a while. I want to tell you about the 3 months that followed. Because this is the part people skip over in these kinds of stories. They go from, "I left," straight to, "and then everything was great." But the middle matters. The middle is where the actual transformation happens. I moved into a smaller apartment, just mine. Picked it specifically because every corner of it was deliberate. The light was good. The neighborhood had a park. The walls were empty until I decided what to put on them. And I lived there for the first month like I was in an experiment. Cooking for myself, spending evenings reading or calling Owen, or sitting on the small balcony watching the street. I kept running. Now I was doing close to 5 miles a few mornings a week. I signed up for a half marathon in 4 months. Not because I thought I could do it, but because a goal that scared me a little felt like medicine. At work, Petra gave me a new account. Bigger, more complex. The kind that 6 months ago would have made me anxious and avoidant. I took it, stayed late a few nights, asked smart questions, and delivered. And here's the thing about progress. It compounds. Every small win made the next one feel less impossible. Every morning I ran when I didn't want to make the next day easier. Every time I handled something at work that would have previously rattled me, the baseline of what I could handle moved up. I wasn't transforming myself. I was excavating myself. Clearing out the sediment of comfort and complacency that had settled over the person I actually was. Somewhere around month 2, I met Hazel. Not in a cinematic way. Not at a party or through a friend or at the exact right moment. At a coffee shop on a Wednesday morning. Because we both reached for the same lid for our cups and neither of us wanted to make it weird. She laughed first. That was the thing. She laughed easily, like laughter was her first language. She was a graphic designer, freelance, working out of this coffee shop most mornings because her apartment got no natural light and she needed, as she put it, to look at humans occasionally or I forget they exist. We talked for 20 minutes about nothing in particular. The kind of conversation that doesn't feel like a conversation. It feels like a continuation. I went home that morning and I didn't think, I need to see her again. I thought, that was a nice morning. And that felt healthy. Not desperate. Not searching. Just open. I saw her again 3 days later. Same coffee shop, different table. She waved. I got my coffee and sat down across from her, and we talked for another 30 minutes. On the fifth time we happened to be there at the same time, I asked if she wanted to get actual food somewhere, because coffee and conversation had become a kind of standing arrangement neither of us had officially made. She said, "I was wondering when you were going to ask." And we went to a small Italian place 3 blocks away and talked for 2.5 hours. I want to tell you what was different about Hazel. Not because she was some idealized version of what a partner should be. She wasn't. She was disorganized in a way that sometimes drove me a little nuts. She forgot to charge her phone constantly. She had opinions about very specific things, like the correct way to make risotto and why most people ruin it. That could go on for an uncomfortable amount of time. She was almost aggressively punctual except when she wasn't, and she made no apology for either. She was a real person, complicated, in particular, and fully herself. But here's what was different. She was interested, not in a performing interest way, genuinely curious about my job, which she didn't understand and asked questions about until she did, about what I was reading, about the half marathon I'd signed up for, which she thought was either brave or insane and wasn't sure which. She asked questions and then listened to the answers. She disagreed with me sometimes and didn't back down just because I pushed back. She told me things about herself that were vulnerable without making the vulnerability into a performance. And she never once made me feel like I was the fallback option. She chose to spend time with me. Every time. Clearly and without ambiguity. And it turned out, I hadn't realized how starved I was for that. For someone who was simply, straightforwardly there. We'd been seeing each other for about 6 weeks when Brooke called. Not out of nowhere exactly. She and I had sent a few civil texts in the weeks before. But this call felt different. She was at a party. I could hear the background noise, and her voice had that slightly too casual tone of someone who had decided to do something they'd been thinking about for a while. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," she said. "Yeah," I said. "About us." "Okay. I think I made a mistake," she said. "I think I wasn't being fair to you. Or to us. And I think I took you for granted." I sat in my apartment in the quiet, and I said, "I appreciate you saying that. Is that all you're going to say? What were you hoping I'd say?" A pause. "I don't know," she said. "Maybe that it's not too late." I chose my words carefully, not to be cruel, but because she deserved honesty. "I think you're realizing that something changed," I said. "And I think you're associating that change with me leaving, as if the change is the reason to come back. But the change was always there. You just didn't see it until it wasn't available anymore." She was quiet. "That's a really clinical way to say it," she finally said. "Maybe," I said. "But is it wrong?" Another pause. Longer. "No," she said. "It's not wrong. I really do wish you well," I said. "And I think you're going to figure out what you want eventually. But I'm not in a position to be the practice round for that." We said goodbye without drama, without cruelty, without the satisfaction of anyone winning. Because that wasn't what it was. It was just two people who hadn't been right for each other finally clear on it. I ran the half marathon in month 4. Came in at around 2 hours and 6 minutes, which for someone who couldn't run 4 blocks 6 months ago was, in my opinion, legitimately astonishing. Owen drove out and stood at the finish line holding a sign that said, "You're doing great, champ," which was both embarrassing and exactly what I needed. Hazel had made a bet with me that I'd finish under 2:15. She owed me dinner, which she made at her apartment. The risotto, which she made correctly, as she would remind me several times. And we sat on the floor eating it, because her dining table was covered in design drafts and neither of us wanted to move them. I remember looking around her apartment that evening. The comfortable chaos of it. Her plants in varying states of thriving. The drawings pinned to the wall in no particular arrangement. The stacks of books organized by color because, she said, that's just easier to see. And I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not just comfort. Not just contentment. Something more active than that. Gratitude, maybe. The specific kind of gratitude you feel when you realize you are exactly where you want to be. I've thought a lot about what that Tuesday night conversation actually was. The something better conversation. And I've landed on this. Brooke wasn't being malicious. She was being honest in a way she probably didn't fully mean to be. She was voicing something that a lot of people feel but rarely say. That comfortable isn't the same as chosen. That staying is not the same as wanting. That sometimes you are in a relationship the way you are in a job you're not ready to quit yet. Not because it's what you would choose if you had nothing to lose, but because the unknown feels riskier than the familiar. She was honest about that. And I will always, in some way, be grateful for it. Because that honesty broke something open in me. It made me ask questions about my own life that I had been carefully not asking. What are you actually building? Who are you becoming? Is this a life you're choosing or a life you're defaulting to? Those questions are uncomfortable. Most people spend significant energy avoiding them. But they're also the questions that, once asked, you can't stop answering. And the answering, that's where the change lives. There's a version of this story where I tell you that I left to win, where the whole point was to become better so Brooke would regret it. And I'd be lying if I said that wasn't in there somewhere. In the beginning, at least. The slight satisfaction of imagining her noticing, of proving something. That's human. That's honest. But here's what actually happened. At some point, the reason shifted. Somewhere between the first run I completed without stopping and the night I sat on my balcony and realized I was genuinely happy with my own company, the goal changed. I stopped running toward her regret. I started running toward my own life. And when you're running towards something real, the things you thought you needed to prove stop mattering so much. Not entirely, but enough. You're too busy going somewhere to worry about being watched. Hazel and I made it official sometime around month 3. Not with a big conversation. There wasn't a moment where we sat down and drew up terms. It just gradually became obvious that there was nothing to define. We were already it for each other. In the quiet, consistent, unglamorous way that real things tend to be. She never made me feel like I had to earn my place. She just made space for me, and I made space for her, and we figured out the rest as it came. I want to go back to Brooke one more time. Not to dwell, but because the story isn't complete without this. About 8 months after we broke up, I ran into her. Literal run-in, at a farmer's market on a Sunday morning. I was there with Hazel. She was there with a friend. We saw each other across a table of heirloom tomatoes, and there was a half-second of pure recognition. The kind you can't prepare for. The kind that bypasses all your composure and lands somewhere in the chest before your brain catches up. She looked good. I want to say that clearly. She looked healthy and well-rested, and like someone who had also been doing some work on herself. We said hi. Brief. Warm. But not the kind of warm that reopens things. The kind of warm that comes from having processed something fully. She looked at Hazel. Hazel, to her infinite credit, smiled genuinely and said hello. And I watched Brooke's face in that moment. Not with satisfaction. Or at least, not only with satisfaction, but with something more complicated. With recognition. Because I could see that she saw it. What Hazel had. The ease. The security. The way Hazel stood next to me without being on guard. Not because Hazel was putting on a performance, but because she actually wanted to be there. And Brooke had once had the chance at something like that. She'd chosen, in her own words, to wait for better. What she hadn't counted on was that I'd take that as an invitation. To go find better. In myself, first. And then, when I was ready, in someone else. We parted ways after 30 seconds of pleasantries. And as Hazel and I walked away, she didn't ask questions. She just took my hand. And we went and found the booth selling the good sourdough and argued about whether you actually need butter if the bread is good enough. For the record, you do? A few months later, a friend told me Brooke was in a relationship now. Someone she'd met through work. They seemed happy from what he could tell. I felt nothing complicated about that. Just the simple, uncomplicated hope that she was. That she'd figured out what she wanted. That she'd learned to choose something rather than wait. We all learn at different paces. Some of us need to watch someone leave before we understand what it means to want them to stay. Here's the thing I've thought about most, looking back. The moment when she said, "Let's stay together until something better comes along." And I said, that's fair. It was fair, not in the way she meant it. She meant it as resignation, maybe, as a kind of sad honesty between two people going through the motions. But in the truest sense of the word, it was fair. Because life is fair in that specific, merciless way. It gives you exactly what you settle for. You stay in the holding pattern, it keeps you circling. You finally decide to land somewhere real, and real is where you end up. I settled for placeholder. I got placeholder. I decided I was worth more than that. And the world, my world, the small and specific and daily version of it, reorganized itself around that decision. Not magically, not immediately, not without the hard weeks and the empty apartment and the runs that made my lungs feel like they were staging a protest. But eventually, completely. If I could go back to that couch on that Tuesday night, I don't think I'd change what I said. That's fair. 2 words that sounded like surrender and turned out to be the first step. Because the moment I agreed with her, the moment I stopped needing her to take back what she said, something in me stood up that had been sitting down for a very long time. Pride, maybe. Or dignity. Or just the basic recognition that I deserved to be someone's first choice. Not their safety net. Not their backup plan. not the comfortable option they stay with until something more exciting shows itself. First choice. And if I wasn't that for her, if she couldn't look at what we had and say, yes, this, I want this, not because I'm scared of something else, but because I actively want this, then she wasn't mine either. We had been holding each other in a loop neither of us had designed, and somebody had to be the one to break it. She expected it would be her. She expected that when better came along, she'd be the one walking. She hadn't considered the possibility that I'd look inward, find something worth fighting for, and decide that the fight was for myself. That's the part she didn't see coming. I ran another half marathon last spring. Finished in 1:58 this time. Hazel made a different sign for this one. I won't repeat what it said because this is a family channel. But it made me laugh so hard at mile 12 that I nearly stopped completely, which she maintains was her strategy all along. Owen brought his wife and their new baby. Petra texted me from across the country. She'd been promoted and relocated 6 months prior, and the text just said, go get it. I did. I think about who I was on that couch sometimes. Comfortable to the point of numb. Accepting less than I wanted because wanting more felt like a risk. Treating the absence of pain as if it were the same thing as happiness. That version of me needed that conversation. He needed her to say the quiet part out loud. He needed the ground to shift just enough that staying still stopped being an option. And maybe that's the real ending. Not the half marathon. Not Hazel. Not the promotion or the apartment or the clearer version of myself I'd finally found. Maybe the real ending is just this. She said something honest. I heard it. And instead of arguing with the truth, I used it. I let it light a fire under something that had been sitting in the dark. And I walked, then ran, toward the heat. I don't know what better means in the abstract. I'm not sure it means anything in the abstract. Better is specific. Better is the morning you wake up and the day in front of you feels like something you built rather than something that happened to you. Better is being wanted clearly, by someone who chose you on purpose and keeps choosing you. Better is looking in the mirror and recognizing the person looking back, not with pride exactly, but with respect. Better is a half marathon in the rain and sourdough arguments at a farmer's market and a sign at the finish line that makes you laugh at mile 12 when you have nothing left. Better is knowing what you're worth and having the patience and the courage to wait for it. She said, let's stay together until something better comes along. I said, that's fair. Then I stopped waiting for better. And I became it.